I grew up in a small town in the Midwest where miles of cornfields rolled out in every direction, and neighbors felt more like extended family. Life there was simple, sometimes too quiet, but it gave me a strong foundation. My childhood was filled with everyday routines and far-reaching dreams. We didn't have much money, but my parents instilled values that mattered more: discipline, resilience, and ambition. My dad, a proud veteran, shared stories of grit and sacrifice, while my mom was the steady, loving presence that held everything together. High school was when I started figuring out who I really was. I found a knack for math and science and started picturing myself as an engineer. My best friend, Tyler, and I used to spend endless afternoons sketching wild inventions and planning out our futures. He was fearless, always chasing the next thrill, while I stuck to structure and goals. But life didn't go according to our plans. Tyler enlisted in the military, and I started college. Between financial setbacks and a few bad decisions, I ended up taking a detour and joined the Army too. The military shaped me into someone tougher, but it came with a cost. I returned home more guarded, the bright-eyed version of me long gone. I poured myself into school and eventually landed a job at General Motors. That's where I met Rachel. At first, Rachel felt like a breath of fresh air in a life that had become all gray edges. She brought energy, laughter, and for a while, stability. We built something real: marriage, a family, a home. I thought we were solid. But over time, something in me started to shift. It was subtle at first, like waking up slowly in fog. My basement workshop, with its faint yellow light and dusty corners, became my place to think, to escape. One night, I was down there working on some rackets, getting ready for the upcoming fall racquetball season. I'd played for years, usually in the A bracket, and I kept myself in shape despite the long hours at GM. At 6 feet 2 inches and about 200 pounds, I was proud of how I held up. Lily, our 7-year-old, came down with Chloe close behind. Those two were inseparable. Ethan, our oldest at 9, preferred solitude and building model airplanes in his room. I'd been sitting there longer than I realized, the sound of the girls' Disney movie playing faintly in the background. After finishing up 3 rackets, I decided to check on the kids. They were glued to Lady and the Tramp, so I started heading upstairs. That's when I heard Rachel laughing. I paused on the stairs. Her laugh, something about it sounded off. Too flirtatious. Too familiar in a way that didn't belong to me anymore. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. Sure would like to try that thing again before the work wears off. That strange phrase triggered something in me. An old conversation from the bar after a racquetball match came rushing back. I suddenly felt lightheaded and sank down on the steps, quietly pulling the basement door shut behind me. I could still hear her voice, hushed and full of energy. "Last time I was on fire," she said. "I can't wait." I didn't want her to know I was there, so I slipped back into my workshop, trying to make sense of what I just heard. The memory was sharp now. One night after racquetball, I'd been at the bar with Ryan and Derek. What started as a typical conversation about the game took an odd turn: too much interest in my marriage, too many subtle digs. I left early, unsettled. But one part of that night stood out. Derek had been joking about Ryan needing a personal surgery. I figured he meant a vasectomy. I mentioned that Rachel had brought that up with me too, though we hadn't decided on anything. But then Derek laughed and said, "No, she wants him to remove the wart." I remember being confused. "What are you talking about?" Ryan turned red and explained he had a wart in a very private spot, something that had been there for years, but his wife Heather was now insisting he get it removed. The weirdest part was how Derek kept making jokes about it being a conversation starter with other women, like it was some kind of twisted asset. It was creepy. I'd felt out of place and left shortly after. Now, after hearing Rachel's phone call, that night didn't feel random anymore. It felt connected. And what scared me most was the growing possibility that she was involved in something I hadn't even let myself imagine before. Rachel had met Ryan and Derek through racquetball. I thought it was casual, just game nights and beers afterward, but I was starting to question that. I wanted to believe it was all innocent, just my mind playing tricks. But then there was Melissa. Melissa had been Rachel's boss for 5 years and had practically wormed her way into our lives. They became close fast, bonding over pregnancy, then school stuff, then wine nights I was never invited to. We'd crossed paths with her family a few times, but I'd never gotten a good read on her. She always struck me as someone who played things close to the chest. Ryan and Derek had joined the Wise Racquetball League a couple of years ago. They had families too, but we never socialized outside of the gym or bar. One day, I mentioned the store where Rachel worked, And that's when Ryan casually said he knew Melissa. They'd gone to high school together. Apparently, they stayed in touch a few times a year. The timeline started lining up. Around 2 years ago, when Chloe was in full toddler meltdown mode, things got harder at home. Lily had just started daycare, and I was clocking in extra hours. Rachel seemed drained, distant. At the time, I thought it was just stress. But now, with everything swirling around me, I couldn't help but wonder, was that when it started? One evening, Rachel finally hit her limit. She broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the daily grind. I did what any decent husband would. I held her, reassured her, and offered to take full charge of the kids during her next day off. She seemed grateful and said she'd consider it. A couple of weeks later, she mentioned talking to Melissa about needing some space, and Melissa had an idea, an upscale shopping weekend in Detroit. I wasn't thrilled, but I didn't want to come off controlling, so I agreed. That Saturday, Rachel and Melissa packed up and headed out. They checked into a motel, grabbed dinner, and went to see a movie. I'd asked for the hotel information just for peace of mind. Rachel gave it to me without hesitation. The next day, they checked out, hit another mall, and made it home by 5 p.m. Rachel returned in high spirits, thanked me for the time away, and told me all about the weekend. She hadn't gone overboard, just picked up a few nice things for herself and the kids. The girls were angels while she was gone, and I didn't have any complaints. That first trip seemed harmless enough. But over the next 2 years, these little weekend getaways turned into a regular thing. Every few months, the same routine: leave early Saturday, come back late Sunday. I didn't mind too much at first. I liked the one-on-one time with the kids, and Rachel always came back refreshed. But after the second trip, I noticed something was different. Her mood was off. She seemed uneasy, withdrawn, almost jittery. When I asked her about it, she brushed me off with a tired smile and said it was just the start of her period. I didn't push. But looking back, I realized a pattern had formed. The nights before her trips, she'd suddenly become very affectionate. But the night she returned, she avoided intimacy altogether. I hadn't pieced it together until recently. One evening, Rachel called down from the top of the stairs, "Daniel, it's bath time for the girls. Can you send them up?" I took a deep breath, called the girls, and walked them upstairs. By the time I came back, Rachel was in the kitchen, flipping through a cookbook like it was any other night. She gave me a warm smile and met my eyes. "Is something bothering you, honey?" I muttered something about a cracked racket, but I kept watching her, quietly trying to read her face. She looked like herself, my wife. But something was different, under the surface. She leaned over, gave me a kiss, and casually mentioned that Melissa had called to plan another shopping weekend. But when she said it, her expression changed, her eyes tightened just slightly, and she looked away almost instantly. That moment told me more than her words ever could. I tried to steer the conversation in another direction. "Do we have anything on the calendar for next weekend?" She shook her head. "Nothing planned." I suggested going to a VFW event. My dad had invited us, and I figured it might be a good family outing. But Rachel didn't even pretend to consider it. "I don't care if your dad's going," she said flatly. "I'm not. It bores me to tears." I tried to offer something more exciting. "How about a trip to Cedar Point? The kids would love it." But she bristled. "We just went to Mackinac Island, remember? What's gotten into you, Daniel? You've never had a problem with me shopping before." I let out a frustrated sigh. "Never mind. I just thought it'd be nice to do something together." She scoffed, turned away, and muttered, "You and Melissa are having fun. I'll go check on the kids." That night, I pretended to be asleep when she came to bed. I heard her whisper my name softly, but I didn't move. Eventually, she gave up and rolled away. I lay there in the dark, my mind running through every moment that now seemed like a red flag. I thought about how close to home this all felt, just a few miles from where I'd grown up. My childhood was nothing extraordinary, just a regular middle-class family with 2 kids. My parents, my older sister, and me. Tyler, my best friend, lived down the block. We were joined at the hip. He was the loud, charming one, always center stage. I was more reserved, the thinker. We spent our teenage years playing ball, chasing girls, and like many small-town boys, losing our virginity right before prom. In high school, I took up drafting and set my sights on engineering. Tyler had no clear path, but we both enrolled at the local community college. That's where things went sideways for me. After a party one night, I got pulled over and arrested for drunk driving. Spent the night in jail. My parents were livid when they came to bail me out. I burned through all my savings on fines and court costs, and I lost my license for a year. For the rest of that semester, I rode a beat-up moped, giving Tyler rides when he needed. It was humiliating. Eventually, I just stopped going to school. Without a car, without money, it all felt pointless. The following year, I enlisted in the Army, hoping my drafting background would land me a technical role and keep me away from Vietnam. The recruiter fed me all the right lines, of course. Tyler decided to sign up too, and we entered under the buddy program guaranteed to train together. Basic wasn't easy, but it was nothing we couldn't handle. During testing, the Army pegged us as good candidates for fire control specialists, basically, the guys who did the math so artillery hit the right targets. We were sent to Fort Sill for training. It wasn't glamorous, but we made the best of it. A few weeks before graduation, we got our deployment orders, Vietnam. After a short leave at home, we flew out to I Corps, where we were assigned to Battery A, 2nd Battalion, 11th Artillery. It was November 1969. Nixon had started reducing troop numbers, so the early months were relatively quiet, lots of flying, sporadic enemy fire, and long hours. We even got a break with a wild R&R trip to Bangkok, which gave us a short escape from the war zone. But then our unit got reassigned to a remote hill deep in the jungle. Everything changed. For months later, I came back on a stretcher. Tyler didn't come back at all. That period was the lowest point of my life. I was broken in more ways than one, physically wrecked, emotionally shattered. I spent weeks in the hospital, then months in rehab. Eventually, they decided I was almost fit for duty and reassigned me to Fort Sill as an assistant instructor. I kept to myself, enrolled in college classes just to stay occupied, and avoided socializing as much as possible. After a year of that, I applied for early discharge and was accepted into an engineering program at a local university. It felt like a second chance. After leaving the Army, I moved back into my parents' house and lived off a mix of savings, GI Bill benefits, and a part-time job. I was a textbook case of a Vietnam vet trying to find his way, closed off, cynical, and mentally stuck in the jungle. I let myself go a bit, growing out a beard, dressing in worn clothes, and mostly avoiding people. Therapy was occasional and, to me, unproductive. But I kept going, if only because it felt like I should. The only thing that brought me comfort was visiting Tyler's parents. Talking with them about their son, my best friend, was the one thing I could offer. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. I was sitting alone in the campus center, reviewing notes for class, when a woman walked up and asked if she could sit down. She had striking red hair and pale skin that practically glowed under the fluorescent lights. Something about her presence immediately drew me in. But when she asked, "Were you in Vietnam?" my body tensed. I answered with a quiet yes, not willing to say more. She mentioned her dad had served in Korea, and just like that, the tension faded a little. We chatted for a while until she had to run to class. A few days later, she returned, same smile, and asked to sit with me again. I was more relaxed this time, and our conversation flowed easily. Somewhere along the way, she realized we hadn't exchanged names. "Daniel Carter," I said, offering my hand. "Rachel Monroe," she replied, laughing as she shook it. That was the beginning. Turned out we had overlapping schedules, long breaks on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Before long, we were spending most of that time together. Rachel talked openly about everything, her family, her friends, her career goals. Her confidence was magnetic, and her social ease reminded me so much of Tyler it was both comforting and bittersweet. I shared what I could about school, my family, but mostly, I just listened. Her voice could have read the phone book and I'd have been captivated. Slowly, I started putting myself back together, shaving again, trimming my hair, even dressing with a little care. My mom noticed and teased me, but I could see she was relieved. After a few weeks, I finally asked her out. She smiled and agreed, though she warned me, "My dad's tough on guys who want to date me." I shrugged. "If being with you means surviving your dad, I'll take my chances." She blushed, called me a charmer, and we set a date. That Friday, I knocked on her front door. Her mother, Carol, greeted me warmly, and before I could speak, she called into the house, "Henry, Rachel's boyfriend is here." Henry, her father, came into the room shortly after. He was a tall man, around my height but much heavier, and his presence filled the space. He gave me a firm handshake and led me into the family room. Military memorabilia covered the walls, a Marine Corps flag, medals, and an old M1 Garand rifle above the fireplace. Henry, a Korean War vet himself, asked about my service. I told him I'd been in Vietnam. He wasn't impressed. He muttered something about Vietnamization, and how the war had become a mess. Carol tried to change the subject, thankfully, and moments later Rachel joined us, giving me an easy out. We talked a little about school before I took her out to dinner and a movie. The whole evening felt like a dream. I barely remember what we ate, but I remember her smile, the way her hand fit into mine. We ended the night at a quiet bar, then I walked her home. When we reached her door, I hesitated, unsure whether to kiss her. But she didn't wait. She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "Thank you for tonight." I kissed her gently, and in that moment, I knew she wasn't just someone I liked. I was falling for her. The next day, I called her. We talked for over an hour. From then on, we were inseparable. A few weeks in, I suggested a weekend getaway, and when I mentioned booking a motel, she blushed but nodded. That night, everything clicked. There were some awkward moments. She noticed the scars from my time in Vietnam, but I reassured her. "I'm okay," I whispered. "I love you, Rachel. I can't help it." She pulled back, tears brimming in her eyes, and whispered, "I love you too, Daniel." I didn't think it could feel like this. I kissed her nose and grinned. Let's do this again and again. For the first time since losing Tyler, I felt whole. We spent the night talking about our future marriage, kids, where we'd live. Rachel was set to graduate soon, and I was a year behind. We agreed she'd start working right away, and we'd get married after I graduated. In the meantime, I got a small apartment near campus, and she spent most of her time there. A week later, I introduced her to my parents. They loved her almost instantly. My mom told me later that she'd never seen me smile so much. Apparently, my therapist noticed the same thing. He actually told me I didn't need to come back anymore. My relationship with Rachel's dad, however, remained tense. Henry didn't like the idea of us living together before marriage and made it known. But things shifted one night when he invited me over to talk. After a few minutes of small talk, he brought up something Rachel had told him about my scars. I was uneasy, but he seemed to genuinely want to understand. I mentioned I'd been stationed at Ripcord in the summer of '70. That got his attention. He knew about Ripcord. From that moment on, something shifted between us. He didn't treat me like a burden or a threat anymore. He treated me like family. After that, everything moved fast. Rachel graduated with honors and landed a job quickly. Her parents, despite their early reservations, encouraged her to move in with me permanently. I finished school on time, got a job at General Motors, and 2 months later, we got married. We bought a modest home and started building our life together. About a year later, our son Ethan was born. 2 years after that came Lily, and 3 years later, little Chloe completed our family. Becoming parents changed everything. Rachel cut her hours at work after Ethan was born and planned to return full-time once the kids got older. Meanwhile, my career at GM progressed. I moved into the world of automated manufacturing, learning new tech as the field changed. By the time Chloe was born, I was working with the earliest versions of computer-aided design systems, a world away from the man I'd been years earlier. On the outside, things looked solid: steady job, growing family, and what seemed like a happy marriage. For a while, life felt close to perfect. We had financial security, 2 reliable cars, and a home we took pride in, expanded over the years with a new bedroom, a second bathroom, and a cozy rec room for the kids. Our children were healthy, happy, and beautiful, and we made time for annual family vacations that became treasured traditions. Twice a year, Rachel and I sent the kids to their grandparents for a long weekend, giving us space to reconnect. I truly believed our marriage was solid. We showed affection openly: a hand-holding, long hugs, little kisses in the kitchen. I used to tell Rachel how lucky I felt to have her. But lately, that certainty had started to crack. Sleep became rare. I'd lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling while my thoughts spiraled. My morning workouts gave way to quiet sessions at my desk, trying to sort out the unease in my gut. I couldn't confront her, not without proof. If she was hiding something, she'd likely lie, or worse, turn it around on me. I wasn't even sure what I was accusing her of, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I loved my family more than anything, but the thought that Rachel might no longer love me back, that terrified me. The days blurred together. I felt like a ghost in my own house, present, but not really there. Tyler, our son, was the first to comment on how distant I seemed. That's when Rachel finally noticed. I blamed it on stress at work, but that was only half true. By Tuesday, I forced myself back into my routine. I hit the racquetball courts again, hoping the game would clear my head. Ryan and Derek were there, same as always, inseparable, like shadows glued together. But lately, their camaraderie felt loaded, like they were in on something I wasn't. When they smirked at me during matches, it felt less friendly, more mocking. By Wednesday, the knot in my stomach wouldn't let go. I made a few calls. First, I dialed Ryan's house. His wife casually mentioned he was away on a business trip in Detroit. Then I called Derek's. Same story. My chest tightened. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't need to catch them in the act. My instincts told me everything. And now, I was furious. That Friday, I stopped by my parents' house. They were in the middle of downsizing, getting ready for a potential move to Florida, but I wasn't there to talk renovations. After some small talk, I broke down. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. I think Rachel's cheating on me. It hit me harder than I expected. I cried for the first time in years. My parents were stunned. My mom whispered, "No, not Rachel. She wouldn't do that to you." My dad looked more analytical. "Why do you think that?" I told them everything. The calls, the strange behavior, the things I'd overheard. My mother wiped tears away while Dad tried to comfort her. "What do you want us to do?" "I need to know for sure," I said. "Can you take the kids tomorrow night? Keep them until Sunday." There was a long pause. Then Dad nodded. "Okay, Daniel. We'll take them. I hope to God you're wrong." "Me too," I said, but deep down, I didn't believe I was. I drove home, numb. Rachel was in the kitchen, humming while she stirred something on the stove. She greeted me with a bright smile, kissed me, and said, "Dinner's almost ready. The kids are in the rec room." She looked energized, almost giddy. It hit me that we hadn't been intimate since last Saturday, not even our usual midweek connection. I'd been dragging through the week on sleeping pills, emotionally dead, and she hadn't so much as asked if I was okay. I tried to bridge the gap. "How about we get the kids to bed early and spend some time together? Just us." Her smile faded. She stepped back slightly and said, "I got my period early today." Her tone was cautious, rehearsed. I forced a smile. "Okay, I understand." She gently touched my cheek. "As soon as it's over, I'll explain everything." I nodded hollowly. "Then it's a date." She returned to her cooking, and I climbed the stairs, heart pounding. She wasn't saving herself for me, she was saving herself for someone else. The voice in my head screamed louder now, "Do something." At dinner, I could barely swallow. The kids chattered happily, completely unaware. I caught myself staring at them, wondering, is this our last meal together as a family? The thought made my throat tighten. The next day, we followed our usual Saturday rhythm. The kids cleaned their rooms, then curled up with cartoons. I stayed in the garage, pretending to work, heart racing. Eventually, Rachel came down with her suitcase, dolled up and glowing. "Chloe, be good while I'm gone, okay? I'll bring you something special." She kissed Chloe on the head, then turned to me. "Back tomorrow evening." I held Chloe in my arms and watched Rachel drive off. She didn't look back. Once she was gone, I turned to the kids. "Hey, how about a night at Grandma and Grandpa's?" They lit up. We packed quickly and headed over. My dad greeted me with a look that said everything. "Good luck, Daniel. I really hope you're wrong." "I hope so too," I said. "Thanks again." I left the kids with my parents, then stopped at Avis to rent a car, just in case Rachel or someone else was watching. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table in silence, replaying the events of the past week. The lies, the coldness, the excuses. Then the phone rang. It was nearly 1 a.m. "Daniel." Her voice was casual, hurried. "Yeah, I'm here." "Everything okay?" I asked, trying not to sound bitter. "We're good. Just had lunch earlier. We're at room 168. 555-645-0168. Melissa's waving at me. We're heading to Meadowbrook for the afternoon. I'll see you tomorrow." And with that, she hung up. "No, I love you." She hadn't said it that morning either. I stared at the receiver in my hand. Then I dialed the front desk at Red Roof and confirmed Rachel had checked in. I thanked them and hung up. Then I dialed again. "Is Ryan Walker registered?" I asked. They said he was, though he hadn't checked in yet. I hung up, trying to stay calm. But the fire inside me was burning hotter than ever. I walked into the workshop, opened the old tool cabinet, and just stood there, staring at my dad's rifle. For a moment, I thought about taking it with me, just in case. But then I pictured my kids, and that image was enough to pull me back from the edge. I couldn't risk never seeing their faces again. Instead, I reached for an old shoebox tucked in the back of a drawer and pulled out a sea knife I'd bought years ago in Bangkok. I strapped it to my leg, packed a few essentials, driving gloves, a couple of water bottles, some candy bars, and hit the road around 2 p.m. It was a 90-mile drive to Rochester Hills, and I barely felt it. My mind was elsewhere, flooded with memories of Rachel, of the life we'd built, and of the growing cracks I couldn't ignore anymore. When I reached the Red Roof Inn, I parked within sight of room 168. But Rachel's car wasn't there. I waited, nerves crawling. Around 5 p.m., a red pickup pulled in, Ryan and Derek, laughing, tossing bags into a nearby room like it was just another guy's weekend. 45 minutes later, they headed out again, still laughing. I followed at a distance, trailing them to Tupper's pub. I parked nearby and sat in silence, watching the entrance, country music humming on the radio like the soundtrack to my dread. Eventually, Rachel's car rolled in. I parked where I could see both her vehicle and the truck. I considered going in, but something told me to wait. At 9 p.m., the four of them finally emerged, all smiles and flirtation, holding hands like high school kids playing at love. My stomach turned. I left before them, racing back to the motel so I could be there when they arrived. I parked and waited. 10 minutes later, they pulled in, giggling under the yellow glow of the parking lot light. I watched in disbelief as Ryan tossed a coin and Derek leaned in to kiss Rachel. Melissa grabbed Ryan's hand, and the four of them disappeared into separate rooms like it was all some depraved game. My thoughts were a storm. This wasn't just some flirtation. This was planned. Routine. Moments later, Ryan emerged from Melissa's room wearing nothing but boxer shorts and holding a beer. He casually walked across the lot and knocked on Rachel's door. Then Derek stepped out too, shirtless, barefoot, shared a few words with Ryan, and they high-fived before splitting off again. That's when the dam inside me broke. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was moving. I pulled on my driving gloves, climbed out of the car, and marched straight to room 168. Standing there, I covered the peephole with my thumb and knocked 2 sharp taps. The door cracked open and Ryan's voice called out, "What the hell, Derek?" Before he could say more, I slammed a fist into his face and followed it up with a kick full of rage. He stumbled back, crashing onto the carpet, hands clutched over his bloodied face. The room was a mess, bed shoved off kilter, bathroom door half open, shower running. I drew the knife and gently tapped the blade against his nose. "Talk," I growled. "How long, Ryan? How long has this been happening? Don't lie." 2, he gasped. 2 years. Joining the same racquetball league, that wasn't just a coincidence, was it? He shook his head. I shut. "No." I leaned in close. "You're sick. Look at me." His eyes opened, wide with fear. "If you ever go near my wife, or any married woman again, I'll find you. And you'll wish I hadn't. You hear me?" He nodded, barely able to speak. "Yes." Then I heard it. The water stopped, and from the bathroom, Rachel's voice echoed out. "Hey, Ryan boy, I thought you were joining me in the shower." I turned slowly. She stepped into view, towel wrapped around her, skin flushed from the heat. When she saw me, the blood drained from her face. The towel slipped and hit the floor. For a second, no one moved. "Ryan boy doesn't look too good," I said, my voice low and cold as I stepped toward her. She scrambled backward and slammed the bathroom door shut. I walked to the nightstand, grabbed the phone cord, and sliced it clean with the knife. Then, just for good measure, I hurled the entire phone at the bathroom door, the crash followed by a shriek from inside. I left the room, but I wasn't done. I walked straight to Derek's room and knocked. The door opened, and I didn't wait. My fist connected with his jaw, snapping his head back as he crumpled to the floor. Melissa shrieked from the bed, frozen in fear. I checked Derek's pulse. He was breathing, but barely responsive. I stepped to the nightstand and ripped the phone cord out of the wall. Then I turned to Melissa, who stared at me wide-eyed, clutching the sheets. "If your husband hears about this," I said coldly, "tell him I said hi." I paused, then added with a twisted smirk, "Or maybe I'll tell him myself." I tossed the phone into the corner and walked out. Outside, I looked up at the stars, drawing in a long breath. The air felt lighter. The rage had ebbed. The voice in my head, the one shouting at me for days, was finally quiet. It was over. I got into the car, about to pull away, when my phone rang. I answered it without thinking. "Yeah, Daniel, it's Henry," came the voice on the other end, Rachel's father. "What's going on?" I asked, flatly. "Rachel's at the house. She's crying. Says she's scared to go home." I checked the time. It was nearly 1 p.m., almost 14 hours since I'd left Rochester Hills. "I don't know what I could have done," I muttered, still reeling. "She says you hurt Melissa's friends badly." "Hurt them?" I laughed bitterly. "They're lucky I didn't kill them. There was silence. "That doesn't sound like you," Henry said, clearly rattled. I paused. "Did she tell you where it happened?" "She said something about outside a restaurant in Rochester Hills." So she was lying, trying to control the narrative. Henry was catching on. "Well," I said slowly, "she's your daughter, Henry. So I guess you'll believe what you want." There was another long pause. "I'm bringing her home. We need to talk." "No problem," I replied. "I'm not going anywhere." He hung up, but I could hear Rachel in the background, begging him not to bring her. Of course, I thought. She's still trying to squirm out of it. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table with my second beer, staring at old family photos I hadn't touched in years. They felt like relics from another life. Then the front door opened. Rachel came in first, clutching Henry's arm like she was hanging on for dear life. "Please, Dad," she said, her voice trembling. "Let us talk. I need to speak to Daniel alone." She looked stripped of everything, no makeup, hair loose, eyes red and swollen. She was shaking like a leaf in a storm, and I couldn't feel anything at all. Rachel wouldn't look at me. Clinging to her father's arm, she tried steering him back toward the door, but Henry didn't move. He dropped into a chair at the kitchen table, his eyes flicking between me and the K-knife lying beside my half-empty beer. "Okay, Daniel," he said, voice tight. "What's going on?" I turned to Rachel with mock politeness. "Go ahead, Rachel. Tell your dad what's been happening." "Shut up, Daniel," she snapped, her tone hard. "You and I can work this out." Her voice was firm, but her eyes betrayed desperation. It hit me how she still thought she could control this, fix things with a few well-placed words. But I was done playing along. I'd be honest now, the kind of honest she'd spent years avoiding. I looked at Henry. Rachel and her boss, Melissa, have a couple of friends they meet up with on their little shopping weekends. I found out, and, well, I didn't take it too well. Rachel sighed and dropped into the nearest chair, her face sagging with defeat. Henry blinked. "No, I don't believe that. Rachel wouldn't." "Cruel." I interrupted. "You'd say that if you saw what I saw last night? Ryan's footprints. In her hotel room." That shut him up. His eyes shifted to Rachel, whose face had gone pale. The panic on her expression confirmed everything. Henry slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. "Oh, God." "Please, Dad," Rachel whispered. "Don't tell Mom. We can fix this, can't we, Daniel? Please." I said nothing. I just sifted through old photographs on the table, trying to reconnect with a version of my life that hadn't been scorched. After a few minutes of tense silence, Henry straightened up and looked between us. "What are you going to do, Daniel?" Rachel was still crying quietly now. I leaned back, staring at a faded photo. "I never told you about Ripcord." "Hell, I've never told anyone. Not even my therapist." I nodded at the box of photos. "You know what's funny, Henry? Your generation frames your medals and tells stories. My generation shoves everything in shoeboxes and locks them away." I picked up a photo of me and Tyler, just two kids in jungle fatigues, smiling like idiots. We got to Firebase Ripcord in May '71. It was supposed to be routine, set up our tools, support the 101st, move on. But this time, it wasn't routine. I looked him in the eye. Ripcord sat near the A Shao Valley, not far from Laos. Bad ground. We were there to stop the NVA from moving south along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. He was listening now. We had a 155 battery, a mortar team, one infantry company, maybe 400 men. Whole base was underground. We didn't know it at the time, but we were surrounded by 12,000 NVA soldiers. I tilted my head. "Remind you of anything? Like Chosen?" Henry nodded, quiet and still. "The first few weeks weren't bad, for us. The hills surrounding us saw the worst action. We had helicopters in and out all day. Every now and then we'd take sniper fire. But then July 1st happened." I paused, remembering. We got hit with our first serious mortar barrage, 20 or 30 shells a day, and soon more. Then they brought out 120mm mortars. New stuff we hadn't seen before. I let out a breath. You couldn't always hear them coming. Between the wind, the choppers, and the background fire, the rounds just arrived. One day I was running from the mess to a bunker. Shell hit nearby, knocked me off my feet. I gave a faint smile. Tyler took one look and said, "Damn, Daniel, you're bleeding." I'd forgotten my armor that day. Never made that mistake again. The shrapnel tore into my upper back. Nothing fatal, but I was flown out to Camp Evans, treated for concussion and minor wounds. I was back on base in a few days. But Ripcord had changed. Now we were taking 70, 80 shells a day. Then came the RPGs, .51 cal fire, recoilless rifles. Every time a Chinook dropped ammo, we'd sprint to load the tools before enemy fire pinned us down again. I shook my head, the memory bitter. One day I took another round of shrapnel, 6 pieces. Nothing deep, but enough to make you wonder if you were next. The exhaustion was total. Between hauling ammo, keeping the tools running, and endless alerts, we were wrecked. Sleep was just a rumor. The skies buzzed with phantoms, B-52s, non-stop bombing runs. Smoke hung heavy over everything. After July 8th, we saw them, NVA crawling up through the wire. We were on high alert every night. We knew they were coming. The room stayed silent. Henry sat motionless. Rachel was barely breathing. Then came the worst part. I continued quietly. Morale tanked. We felt abandoned. The shelling never stopped. We lost over 500 men, dead or wounded. I looked at Henry, voice trembling now. They had me carrying body bags to the helipad, one after another. My throat tightened. On July 18th, everything blew apart. A Chinook hauling howitzer rounds got hit, crashed over one of the batteries and our ammo stockpile. The whole base shook. 6 guns gone. Dozens killed. Flames everywhere. Explosions all night long. I trailed off. The images were still too sharp, too real. Rachel didn't speak. Henry's face had gone gray. And I just sat there, hands trembling slightly, holding the last photo of Tyler I ever took. We ran straight to the battery. It was chaos, flames, smoke, screams. A lot of the wounded were badly burned, their skin slick with fuel and fire. Tyler and I lifted a machine gunner onto a stretcher. When I grabbed his arm, the skin peeled right off in my hand. The smell of burning flesh hit me like a wall. I'll never forget that stench. Henry's face crumpled as I spoke. He nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Rachel, meanwhile, looked horrified, though I couldn't tell if it was for Tyler or because her house of lies was finally crumbling. I wiped my eyes and pressed on. We all knew ripcord wasn't going to hold, I said flatly. But the brass didn't care. 4 NVA regiments in one spot? They saw it as an opportunity, not a death trap. My voice grew colder. A few nights later, we went on high alert. The jungle lit up with automatic fire. Tyler and I set up an M60 just outside the FDC bunker. We were ready. Flares lit the sky as the mortar platoon worked nonstop. Infantry returned fire toward the tree line. Overhead, attack helicopters fired rockets and miniguns at anything that moved. Tyler and I stayed low. We didn't want to draw fire. There was an infantry squad just ahead, 20, maybe 30 yards in front of us. Then it happened. The infantry popped up and started firing. Grenades, bursts of rifle fire. And then, I trailed off. 20 mmEA mortar rounds landed right on them. The earth trembled. Tyler and I dove into the foxhole. When we looked up again, the trench ahead of us was gone. Buried. We scrambled into position. Tyler fired while I fed him ammo, both of us running on instinct. The platoon sergeant crawled over. We told him what happened. He nodded grimly and crawled off to get more belts. I swallowed hard. Just as we were down to our last belt, I heard it. An M16 report, close. Next thing I knew, it felt like a sledgehammer hit me, back and thighs. I collapsed onto the trench edge, face twisted in pain, staring up at Tyler. I saw it in his eyes, the realization, the panic. But he couldn't say anything. He held my hand. Just once. And then, the light left his eyes. I stopped, wiping my face again. My throat clenched, but I forced myself forward. My best friend. My brother. Gone. And I was alone. There was a sniffle. Rachel. I didn't look at her. Couldn't tell if it was guilt or grief. I kept going. When I looked up, Corporal Tran was standing there. An M16 aimed right at me. I paused, the memory like a knife under the ribs. Tran was one of our Kit Carson scouts. A North Vietnamese defector. Or so we thought. He emptied an entire clip. I took several rounds to the back, but my body armor saved me from worse. Still, I had cracked ribs, a concussion, and a bullet in my thigh. It didn't hit bone, but it dropped me fast. I could feel myself slipping, shock setting in. Tyler was dead. I was shot. I wanted to pass out, but something inside wouldn't let me. I held on, focused on the rage. My vision blurred. I barely heard Tran reload. But then, he didn't reload. He thought I was dead. I played along, held still. Tran dropped his rifle, jumped over the trench, and started waving a flashlight, calling out in Vietnamese. I kept shaking as I recalled it. A rocket-propelled grenade came flying in, missed both of us by inches. Then, out of the trees, 3 sappers appeared. AKs, satchel charges, covered in mud. They looked like ghosts. I barely had the strength to move, but I reached for the M60, still under Tyler's lifeless body. I fired 2 bursts. The belt ran dry. The sappers dropped. Tran turned, stunned. Then he screamed and drew a machete from his belt. Most scouts carried them to cut through jungle brush. But this wasn't for brush. He lunged at me. I pushed off the trench edge, dropped the M60, and drew my knife. We struggled, 2 half-dead men in a pit, surrounded by hell. I got on top of him. He reached for the machete, but he never got it. I paused, voice barely a whisper. I don't even know how long I sat there. Flares overhead, the air filled with tracer rounds, the howitzers rumbling, the stink of cordite, smoke, and burning flesh. It felt like hours. It felt like hell. Finally, I felt someone grab me. Mike, my platoon sergeant, pulling one arm. Lieutenant Dixon had the other. Dixon shouted something about napalm coming, that we had to move. I blinked, still seeing it. Tyler's face, the burning hill, Tran's body. I reached for my beer, my finger tracing the edge of the knife beside the purple hearts. Henry and Rachel stayed quiet. I couldn't bring myself to meet their eyes. That's when I blacked out. I said finally. Woke up in a medical bunker with an M4 in my arm. Some battalion surgeon was patching me up. Doc said I'd make it, that I'd be evacuated by dawn. The helicopters were flying under heavy fire. 2 had already been shot down before mine made it out. My bird took a few hits too. 1 round tore through the crew commander. But I made it out. By then, they'd already decided to evacuate Ripcord. Took everyone out on the 21st. Then they bombed the place flat. I didn't care. Within 24 hours, I was on a flight to Japan, then transferred to Walter Reed. I was there for a month. Some colonel I'd never met, probably never even heard of Ripcord, handed me a silver star for eliminating my enemies. I reached into the box beside the photos and placed the medal on the table, next to the purple hearts. It was identical to the one Henry kept mounted above his fireplace. I shook my head. Doctors were kind. Physical recovery was decent. But my mind? I stared at the wall. I had nightmares every single night. Couldn't shake the sounds, the smells, the faces. Then I looked away, ashamed, broken. Rachel still hadn't spoken. And for once, she didn't have anything clever to say. I missed Tyler's funeral, but went home before reporting back to Fort Sill. One of the hardest things I've ever done was visiting Tyler's parents. They didn't ask about Vietnam. They didn't ask what happened to their son. They just sat there, silent, grief in every line of their faces. I stared at the floor and finally choked out. Why did I survive, and he didn't? I ask myself that every day. Therapy helped in small doses, but I was withdrawn from the world. I barely functioned at Sill, going through the motions and avoiding people. When I left the army, I moved back in with my parents and re-enrolled in school, not out of passion, just because I didn't know what else to do. I looked up at Rachel, my voice soft. Then I met you. She lowered her eyes, voice quivering. You brought me back to life. I mean that. You were kind, patient. You made me feel like everything wasn't broken. You gave me something to hope for again. She swallowed hard. I fell in love with you, Daniel. You saved me and gave me 3 amazing kids. I'll always be thankful for that. We sat in silence for a long time. Henry cleared his throat. What now, Daniel? I looked at him, drained. Henry, I've been betrayed twice in my life. Both times, I lost my best friend. Rachel broke into sobs. No, Daniel. Please. Tears blurred my vision. Henry's eyes were wet too. He asked gently, are you really willing to throw everything away over one mistake? Rachel's head lifted, hope flickering behind red, tearful eyes. But I couldn't let the lie stand. It wasn't one mistake, Henry, I said. I found out last night that Rachel's been cheating for nearly 2 years. And it wasn't just one guy. Rachel exhaled shakily, closed her eyes, and slumped in her chair. I turned to Henry. Does that answer your question? He stood slowly, the weight of everything dragging on him. He looked at Rachel and shook his head. You're my daughter, and I should love you no matter what, he said. But I've lost all respect for you. I can't even find the words. Rachel reached out, but Henry stepped back. Then he turned to me. Daniel, you don't deserve this. Do what you have to, but don't hurt her. I couldn't take it anymore. No, Henry. I'm beyond that, I said. Then, calmly, I slid the knife back into its sheath and handed it to him. He took it silently, nodding, then walked to the door, already thinking about how he'd explain this to Carol. The door clicked shut behind him. The phone rang. Neither of us moved. When it stopped, the silence was suffocating. I finally said, I thought the cops would be knocking this morning, not your father. Rachel flinched. Melissa and I told them we were attacked outside the bar. We hoped, if the guys stayed quiet, you wouldn't call their wives. I sat back, stunned. So you all lied. There was a moment of clarity, like a fog lifting. They'd covered it up. I was free. Their lie wouldn't hold up for long. So, I asked flatly, where are they now? She fidgeted, I starting. They're still in the hospital. Under observation. How bad? I asked. Ryan has a broken nose, cheekbone, and ribs. Derek's got a dislocated jaw, 3 broken teeth, a concussion. I cut her off. Don't forget their balls, Rachel. She gasped. Fear crept into her voice. No, you really hurt them. Then she added, I didn't know you were so cruel, Daniel. Did you have to do that? I stared at her, stunned. You're defending them? Before she could answer, the phone rang again. You should get that, I said, walking toward the bathroom. It's probably for you. I splashed cold water on my face. The reflection in the mirror stared back hollow-eyed. I looked as wrecked as I felt. My body had aged a decade in one night. When I came back, Rachel was still standing by the phone, her hand frozen on the receiver. She hung up slowly and dropped into a chair. Her voice was empty. Did you really tell Melissa's husband? I shrugged. Why shouldn't I? He called Ryan and Derek's wives. Melissa's been kicked out. He's filing for custody of their daughter. She's going to need a lawyer. Rachel started crying again, this time from panic. She fired me, too. Said it was all my fault. I gave a bitter laugh. Of course she did. Then I asked, who introduced you to Ryan and Derek? It was Melissa, wasn't it? Rachel sniffled. How did you know? I shook my head grimly. Because when I told Grant, Melissa's husband, what you two did, he didn't believe me. Said I was trying to ruin their marriage. Called me a liar. I paused. Then I mentioned Ryan Walker. And his face changed. He went white. Started swearing. First time I ever saw him lose it. She didn't respond. You told me years ago that Melissa's second marriage ended badly. Estranged from her parents. Sister she never talks to upstate. I leaned forward. Well, about a year ago, Grant was auditing a company. Met her sister, Amanda. They hit it off. One night, Amanda invited him to dinner with her husband, Sean. Rachel froze. I could see the color drain from her face. Amanda had a story to tell, I continued. Turns out Sean was Melissa's first husband. She cheated through their whole marriage. He found out, kicked her out, and divorced her. Rachel stared at the floor, trembling. And guess who she was sleeping with back then? I didn't need to say it. The look on her face said she already knew. But now, looking back with clearer eyes, I can see the cracks were already there. Ryan Walker. Rachel froze, breath caught in her throat. When I mentioned his name, Grant put it together. Melissa wasn't just cheating on him. She was doing to him what you've been doing to me. I let the silence linger, let it sting. Then I added, no wonder he kicked her out. I took a breath, steadying the storm in my chest. And now, like Grant, I'm wondering how long I've been the idiot in the story. Rachel shook her head, crying again. Daniel, it was only Ryan and Derek. Just during those weekends. I swear, please believe me. I didn't plan it. I didn't even think about other men until Melissa. She trailed off, searching for words. Before our first shopping trip, she continued, Melissa was acting strange, crying, dramatic. She kept twirling this little handkerchief like she was on stage, begging me to come. She didn't want to be alone. I stayed silent, arms crossed. Encouraged, Rachel pressed on. I knew she flirted. I didn't think she'd actually hook up with anyone. Then we got to the restaurant, and there he was. Ryan. Melissa said they'd gone to high school together, but I doubted it. He was too smooth. She took a breath. He danced with both of us. Kept complimenting me. I had a few drinks, more than usual. And when his hands started wandering, I didn't stop him. Her eyes flicked toward mine, then away again. Later that night, Melissa went to his room. It was next to ours. I could hear everything through the wall. I clenched my jaw. And that's why you came home withdrawn, sullen. Like something had cracked. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. Yeah. That morning, Ryan was gone. Melissa wouldn't shut up about him. She talked about him for weeks afterward. At lunch, at work. Said he was fun. Said I should try it too. I stared at her, disgusted. She joked about it. About his wart. At first, I laughed. But she kept bringing it up. And eventually, the idea didn't seem so crazy. I scoffed. So the idea of cheating on your husband was a running joke between you two? Rachel looked ashamed. I didn't think it would happen. But the next time we planned a trip, Melissa said Ryan wanted me, and she was fine with it. She hesitated. I laughed, nervously. I asked what she'd do if I said yes. She just smiled and said Ryan had a friend, Derek. And you didn't say no. I didn't say anything, she whispered. I thought I could handle it. That it wouldn't go that far. But it did. Yes. She lowered her head. We met them at the restaurant. Drinks, dancing, more drinks. I stopped thinking. I let it happen. You slept with him that night. Yes. Her voice cracked. It wasn't better than what we had. But it was different. Exciting. Because it was wrong. I could pretend I wasn't me. Exciting. I said, bitterly. It turned you on to betray me? To become someone else for a night while I stayed home with the kids. She turned away, choked by a sob. Yes. And Derek. She nodded. Later. After a few trips. Melissa joked she missed Ryan. So I danced with Derek. Then I let him stay with me. And you kept doing it. Yes. Her voice faded. There was one night. They even swapped. Excuse me. She hesitated. I didn't realize at first. I fell asleep with one, woke up with the other. I don't even remember when they switched. I shook my head in disbelief. I felt like I was living two lives, she whispered. At home, I loved our family. I still do. But those weekends. I got addicted. It made me feel alive again. I glared at her. And when I saw you at the motel? She winced. I looked in the mirror and saw the truth. I was disgusting. I hated myself. I stood. Well, that's one thing we agree on. Her voice trembled. Daniel, please. Don't throw everything away. Too late. I picked up my keys. I'm going to get the kids. After Chloe's asleep, we'll tell Ethan and Jesse, gently, that their parents won't be living together anymore. I won't mention you threw it all away for some thrill. Her voice cracked. Daniel, I love you. Please. I turned, exhausted. Why should I stay? It was only a few nights a year, she sobbed. I never saw them outside those weekends. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? I echoed. You gave away the most important thing we had. You destroyed everything we built, just for a few nights of pretending. She was sobbing now, shoulders shaking. I kept going, because I had to. What exactly do you want me to forgive? Giving yourself away to strangers? The lies? The humiliation? She didn't answer. I stared at the kitchen, photos on the fridge, drawings on the wall, Chloe's little chair in the corner. It felt like someone else's home now. I've been thinking, I said quietly. 6 months from now, a year, 5 years. I might say I've forgiven you, but I'll never forget. I looked at her. Every time I hear your voice, see your face, I'll see that night. And I can't live like that. She rocked in her chair, whispering, no, no, please. After a long silence, I said, can I ask you something? She lifted her head slowly, eyes empty, like a prisoner waiting for a sentence. You lost the man who loved you more than anything. You lost the respect of your parents. Mine. Me. You lost your job. And one day, you'll have to explain to our kids why their family broke apart. I paused. Was it worth it? She didn't answer. Just cried. And I turned and walked out the door.